Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by the American Academy of Pediatrics and HealthyChildren.org. Today we're discussing media balance. Children today are immersed in digital and social media more than ever before. But how much media consumption is too much? In today's webinar, we'll cover ways parents and caregivers can help kids strike a healthy balance. But before we begin, a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so if you lose connectivity for any reason, you will be able to watch and listen to the archived webinar, which we'll post to our website in a few days. If we can help you with any technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat function to send us a message. We will have time at the end of the webinar for a question and answer session. To ask a question, please use the chat function. You can activate chat by clicking on the speech bubble at the bottom center of your screen or the person-shaped icon for mobile users. You can send in your questions at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Now, let me introduce our host, Dr. Jennifer Shu. Dr. Shu is a practicing pediatrician, author, and mom in Atlanta. She is the co-author of the AAP books, Heading Home with Your Newborn and Food Fights, a frequent guest on national and local television, radio, and web-based programs. She's also served as the Living Well health expert for CNN.com, has contributed medical information to Baby Center and WebMD, and serves on the Parents Magazine Advisory Board. And finally, she is the medical editor of HealthyChildren.org, the official parenting website of the AAP. Welcome, Dr. Shu.
Thanks so much for having me, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We are going to talk a little bit about media. What is media? How much screen time is appropriate? And at what age should a child get their own cell phone if they're going to get one? And so these are important and common questions that many parents and caregivers ask and have challenges with as our children and teens spend more and more time online. Today, we have joining us to talk a little bit about media balance, Dr. Susie Timopoulos. Dr. Timopoulos is a pediatrician and media use researcher currently serving as Associate Professor of Pediatrics at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine. She's a general pediatrician and the Associate Medical Director of Pediatric Ambulatory Care at Bellevue Hospital Center. Dr. Timopoulos is also a member of the Pediatric Ambulatory Care Leadership Council, an entity in the New York Health and Hospital Public Health System that develops clinical guidelines and implements evidence-based research. She's been on the executive committee for the AAP's Council on Communication and Media since 2018 and is the AAP liaison for the TV Parental Guidelines Monitoring Board. Most recently, she was part of a team of expert pediatricians that collaborated on the development of the newly launched family media tools, which we'll hear more about today. Welcome, Dr. Timopoulos.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today.
So before we get started, let's just discuss the basics. What exactly is media?
Yeah, it's definitely important to define, and there's a wide spectrum of what constitutes media. And media includes smartphones, televisions, video games, social media, smart speakers, apps, or basically anything connected to the internet, and whether it's at home or at school.
Excellent. So it's ubiquitous. We see it everywhere, and kids are starting at really younger and younger ages these days. So now that we know what media is, how do we find a healthy balance between media use and things like healthy eating and sleeping and exercise?
Yeah, definitely raising children in the world of media is really hard. And the majority of parents are concerned that their parents are spending way too much time on screens. And yes, media use comes with both benefits and risks. Children can be exposed to many new ideas, new knowledge. They could have bridging connections with peers, with families that live far away, and they really can learn positive things from pro-social media, which will not only help kids and teens, but also teach empathy and tolerance and a whole wide spectrum of items. But as you mentioned, media can definitely have negative impacts and can contribute to numerous health risks like obesity and overweightness, lack of sleep, school problems, aggression, and other behavior issues. And what I find as a pediatrician and as a researcher, that children are individuals and they develop their own unique relationships to media. And some of whom the children will be more susceptible to the negative effects of media, and some are differentially susceptible to more positive effects. So definitely, each child is unique. And as you mentioned, it is definitely so ubiquitous, and today's media, I think, is so habit forming, and it's so frictional. People use the word frictionless to use, that it's really hard to take a step back and really intentionally plan out how, when, and media will fit into children's daily lives. All of which why the AAP embarked on developing these new tools that we'll talk about today.
And one of the things that makes it so easy to access different types of media, it's portable devices such as cell phones, which we see, in all ages right now. Is there a certain age that you recommend that a child, may have a cell phone? Maybe they never will have one, but what's the youngest age you might recommend one?
Yeah, like when to give a child their first cell phone is really important, and I feel a really difficult decision for a lot of parents. Many parents feel unprepared to make this decision. Um, when children get their first device, it could definitely mean easy access to digital world and a connection to various social connections. A lot of families choose a cell phone for safety concerns, but there's also a lot of advertising content that isn't so great, that isn't so appropriate, and basically a new social dynamic that they were not aware of. So definitely, I agree with you that kids need parents' guidance as to the right time um, to get a phone, and what type of phone, which we'll talk about as well, and how to build a healthy relationship with it. Um, the American Academy of Pediatrics, in collaboration with AT&T, developed a new phone ready quiz that helps family assess their child's behaviors and developmental maturity. So you want to know how are children following rules about other media in the home? How responsible are they in doing tasks, keeping track of their backpack, their hats, their gloves? Are they losing things? Because these phones are also very expensive. So you really want to make sure that they're, responsible and ready for that responsibility. And also, I think also very important is families' own values, and that sort of definitely plays a role. There isn't a right age. The quiz is great, and thank you for putting this up. It's a 10-question quiz, and it gives you one of three recommendations. It tells you that you're ready. You're in the ready zone, in the almost ready zone, and the not quite yet ready zone. And we really want, as pediatricians, for you to talk to your child about goals and rules that you will put in place when a phone gets bought, before the phone is actually in their possession. I think it's important to have that discussion and lay some ground rules. And I think as parents, it's important to be familiar with issues and challenges with getting a phone. Healthychildren.org, as part of the AAP and AT&T Screen Ready websites, have really a lot of great tips and resources about how families can set parental controls on their cell phone, talk about texting and driving, talk about how, like, what rules there could be in place to help parents make that decision and to sort of maintain this healthy relationship.
Yeah, and I think maintaining is a key word because as the child gets older, maybe they get a little bit more freedom in their use of their phones and other screens. Or if a parent notices that suddenly they're seeing inappropriate things, then maybe some of the parental controls need to tighten up. So on the screen, we have the QR codes to the Family Media Plan and the Phone Ready questionnaire. And in the chat box, you'll see a link to some articles in healthychildren.org as well. And next, we will show a video regarding the family media plan and how families can prioritize some things for their
What is media? It's television, smartphones, video games, apps, social media, smart speakers, and any other technology connected to the internet, whether at home or at school. A family media plan is a personalized agreement that can help your family find balance, both online and off. The plan provides age-based tips to help you communicate about media and resources to make the plan work for your family. To create your plan, simply start by entering some information about your family. Next, select from a list of 8 specific priorities that matter most to you and your family. You can choose them all or just a few. Then, save your plan and refer to it whenever you need to. Get started today.
So that was a really quick overview of the 8 specific priorities. And now Dr. Tomopoulos will go into some of those in more depth.
Yeah, and to talk about the family media plan, definitely as a pediatrician and as a media researcher, I think the messages that we give and the guidance we provide for families needs to go beyond screen time limits and unplugging. And the goal of this new family media plan is to help families feel less overwhelmed and more effective in supporting their children while they're growing up in this digital world. This family media plan provides messages about how to communicate with your child. It encourages reflection of your child and your own relationship with media. I think a lot of kids look and see what their parents are doing, and parents are like, and caregivers are definitely important role models. You really want to model that behavior and the healthy habits that you expect your child to have, whether it's using the cell phone or their computer or the digital device. And you really want to talk about these behaviors and why they're so important. The media plan, I think, is wonderful in that it shows you how to use the plan, which we'll go through a little bit about the 8 priorities that you mentioned. It also has resources on how to set up smartphone safety settings and other settings that the AAP provides, and the various links that you mentioned, Jennifer. The AT&T Screen Ready website also, and then another website that I recommend is the Common Sense Media website, and that also provides a lot of really great resources on how to put settings and parental controls on media, video, phones, the whole slew of what media is. So definitely important. As you mentioned, there are 8 priorities that you can choose from. So we ask families to treat it like a menu, like you're out at a restaurant, and you're not going to pick everything on the menu. You want to pick 1, 2, 3, just a couple. And we recommend people choose priorities that are important to them and that they're motivated to work on. You don't want to pick like everything, that even if it's a really hard concept. You really want to start easy. Start with what is motivating and pick one. If you have older children, school age or teens, you can definitely involve your children in doing the media plan together. I think that's really great, and it opens up this discussion that you can have, because it is really a difficult discussion to have. And what we did with this media plan is each of the 8 priorities has a lot of practical goals that you can pick, and you can pick one goal, you can pick all of the goals, which I think is helpful to sort of fine tune it with your own individual family. And then in addition, each priority and goal has a sort of why it's important and the evidence, like the studies behind why we say that this is an important goal or priority. And we've asked parents and other pediatricians for practical tips how to implement these priorities, because I think it's easy to say this is a goal, but then I think it's really helpful to have practical tips on how to bring in those goals into your family. So
you had mentioned a little bit about parents being role models. I think that is a super hard thing, at least for me to do, because I'm a heavy user of devices. And so that's an excellent reminder. I think, sometimes when I talk to patients about limits on screen time, whether it's, 1 to 2 hours per day, for example, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, where the educational screen time doesn't count towards that limit because that's a necessary thing. But when some of my patients want to do more video games or other screen times, and I say they have to match their extra screen time above their allotment with reading or exercise or practicing piano or whatever it is, cleaning their room, so it's not just more and more screen time added. You have to find ways to balance it all out.
Yes,
So I think,
absolutely.
are we ready to move on to the next slide then?
Yeah, so for media, so for media balance, I agree. It's just finding that balance. And all right, so next slide, kindness and empathy, definitely respecting others both online and in person, having family expectations about being kind and understanding is really helpful, and talking about that, saying that up front. Cyberbullying, I think it's important to have a plan on how to deal with cyberbullying. And then being polite and considerate in person and online. It's just how you are in person, and the expectations are definitely, should go over to the online.
Sometimes it's easier to be impolite online because you have some degree of anonymity. And so you'll see in lots of groups, people coming across much ruder than they would if they're in person. You also have to remember is that sometimes when you write things, the tone doesn't travel well. And so even though the intent may not be, mean or rude or whatever, it may come across as that way. So thank you for sharing that. Let's move on to screen-free zones and times.
Yeah, so these are two different priorities. So screen-free times and zones are we should treat them differently. Some recommendations include creating like screen-free zones in your home, and say this area is off limit. Like if we're at the kitchen table eating, phones are off limit, and you could put a basket in the middle of the table and everybody has to put in their phone in the basket, parents included, and just sort of say this is a screen-free zone and we're not bringing screens to the dinner table. I think also like having screen-free times is important, like having one screen-free activity a week or 2 activities a week where you're silencing phones, you're putting them away, you're putting them on do not disturb, and this again includes adult phones, and putting them aside and having some activity that does not involve the screen, playing, like you said, reading, going outside, cleaning. Although,
and you may also want to cut off a time prior to sleep, whether that's half hour, 2 hours, because sometimes screens can interfere with the ability to fall asleep, and sometimes the light from screens can also affect your sleep.
No, absolutely. So the recommendations are half an hour to an hour before the expected bedtime. You'd want to turn off those devices. We also recommend charging those devices outside, because we've seen when we've looked at studies tracking tablet use as young as 4 years of age, kids will turn them on in the middle of the night for a few, for 15, 20 minutes, play with something, and then go back to sleep. So you really want to charge those devices outside of the bedroom.
Or they'll stay up all night on their devices. All right, let's talk about the actual content that kids are viewing. What can you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, as everybody knows, there's probably like a million shows, apps, video games that all are vying to get your family and your children's attention. And I think finding good content that is a good fit with your family is so important, and it takes work. It's a hard thing to do. I think it's worthwhile to try to find content that has positive role models for your family, that provides enjoyment for your family, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for creative experiences. For example, you may want to try out apps or media as a family together. You may want to be able to review a game before you buy it or play it or agree to it, just to sort of see what the content is. I think a lot of kids can get on and buy some, definitely get games and other things that you may not fully understand what the content is. So I think just being intentional and more aware of what media is being used.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's just easier to use the electronic version of a game, for example. If you do a word game like Scrabble, you don't have to put the tiles together. It's just a click of a button is much easier. So, and you can play with people who aren't in the same room with you. So I think there definitely are some advantages, and it can be hard for parents to keep up now because there are so many options. but that'll keep us on our toes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk about talking to our kids about media.
Yeah.
What can you share about that?
I think media shouldn't be a taboo topic. It's all around us. So we have to talk about it. And I think it's hard because I think a lot of the kids oftentimes know more about media and apps than the parents do. So I think it's an opportunity for parents to learn more about media. And I think the more you discuss it, it becomes part of your daily routine. You can talk about it. You can talk about media at the dinner table. You can talk about it at a family meeting. And I think the more you talk about it, the more natural it is to sort of find out about what they're finding on media. I mean, it's all about just open discussions and conversations about what they're seeing, what they're experiencing on media, especially the older school age kids and teens.
Yeah, and sometimes when they even see news events, such as school violence and things, that can certainly be very upsetting, even though the child may not have intentionally tried to watch it. And so, really important, like you said, to keep an eye on what they're doing and talk to them, debrief
Mhm.
about it.
No, absolutely
What
debrief.
What about privacy and, some settings that parents need to be using on their kids' devices?
Yes, I think this is really important. I think we get a lot of questions about how to do this. And like I said earlier, there are a lot of resources online that walk you through step by step to set digital privacy settings. There are a lot of videos on these on Common Sense, on AAP, on AT&T, Screen Ready about how to do that, because I know sometimes a lot of us are more technically challenged than others in terms of setting up these settings. And again, you want to have this ongoing conversation about online behavior. It's not put on the settings and then forget about it. It's just having that, online discussion about what's going on, talking about avoiding oversharing, talking about inappropriate content, talking about rabbit holes, and if they see something inappropriate, that you're there to discuss it with them about how they felt and what they saw. And I think that that definitely is important, because a lot of kids sometimes get stuck down rabbit holes and they end up getting exposed to content that really isn't appropriate or scares them, or they have questions about. So I think just saying that, look, you may come across some things that are not appropriate, and we can definitely discuss it.
I think the hard part can be when a child doesn't realize something's inappropriate. They can be so trusting of a random person on the other side of the screen, assuming that it's a friend who's asking for their home address and, things like that. So it's super challenging, to navigate.
No, absolutely. And saying that, and we had this term stranger danger in the past, of like not approaching strangers on the street, but a lot of times these strangers come across to kids as other kids. And I think just making kids aware that not everybody who is coming across that is saying that they're a fellow teenager or somebody that appear might necessarily not be. And I think it's important for them to be aware of that. And that's a discussion I often have with, as a pediatrician, with my patients. And I find it interesting how many teens say to me that, oh, but they said they were 13 or 4, whatever.
Exactly.
So you really want to just say, well, that's not always the case.
What about this final bullet about limiting media use when it begins to interfere with life? What do you mean by that?
Definitely setting in limits when it's interfering with sleep, it's interfering with school, it's interfering with social relations, with play. You really want to sort of get a handle of what aspect of media is so challenging and habit forming that you can sort of intervene on that behalf.
Okay. And then our next slide before we go on to questions, using media together as a family. What are your thoughts?
Um, Definitely bonding with family through movie nights. I think it's really important to sort of turn screen time into family time, and that's an easy way to do that. I think there's a lot of streaming that's going on various streaming sites, subscription sites, and you can definitely at home end up going through different movies and having it be family time. I think co-viewing media with your child is really important. I think it really helps understand kids and understand what they're watching and what they're exposed to. And then definitely the kids who like playing a lot of games, I know playing like video games with them and taking turns playing games sometimes is also helpful because that's part of what they want to do for their 1 hour of game playing, and you could definitely join them in on that 1 hour of video game playing and play with them, and that's again family time, and it's an opportunity to discuss.
Right. So interactive play rather than parallel play where the children are on one device and the parents might be on another device. One of the questions that came through from our audience today is, what about grandparents who are addicted to their cell phones? We talked a little bit about parents, but what if other adults in the child's life seem to be addicted? Is there anything that we can do about that, or how would you explain that to the child?
I definitely would say having a conversation with that adult or caregiver about their media use. You could actually add grandma if you want to the media plan as well. The media plan is great. You can add mom, children, and grandma. I mean, you could add whoever you want into the profile of the media plan, and you can sit together and have a discussion about what that means. And I think, yeah, a discussion definitely would help.
hmm I kind of liken it to like if a grandparent or a parent has cookies in the house, but they don't want the kids to eat them. Well, keep the cookies somewhere else. So if you don't want your child to see you on your device, do that somewhere else, when your child's not around. So we are ready to move into the question and answer portion of this presentation. And thank you all for submitting questions during the presentation and in advance. One common theme that we got in in the questions had to deal with younger children. So first of all, they wanted to know, what are the actual screen time recommendations for that 1 to 3 year group? And if certain ages aren't supposed to be watching TV, for example, what about when a parent wants to be watching a TV show or sports on TV? And what do you do? Is it okay to have the child in the room? So what kind of specific considerations do we have for the young children?
Yeah, so absolutely. The AAP guidelines are based on evidence and studies that have been conducted in the past. And we know that for kids younger than 18 to 24 months, we really would recommend avoiding digital media. And this is less than about 18 months. And the reason for that is that probably about 80% of brain development occurs in the first 3 years of life. So we know that babies under 2 really learn from live interactions, from you talking to the child and using words. And then people often ask me also, like, what about video chatting? Is video chatting okay? And I think video chatting is great, especially if you have a grandma or a family member that is abroad or far away. I think using video chat, because again, it's an interaction, it's a back and forth conversation, really is acceptable for and appropriate for kids under 18 months of life. Above 18 to 24 months and older to about 3 or 4 or 5, definitely you really want to be thoughtful about the media you're exposing the child to. You really want to try to pick high quality media that you co-view. We call something when you're watching media and scaffolding. You want to watch a show and you want and your child has a favorite character. You can use that character later on in the day to say, oh, what was this person's favorite color? Let's talk about colors. Let's talk about numbers and counts, and use that character in your everyday sort of activities. Or if the character went to the zoo, you can say, oh, do you remember we went to the zoo too? Like, what was your favorite animal? And sort of bring in that discussion about what the child is watching into your child's life. And I think that makes a better connection as to what they're watching. In terms of like being on a show that's not appropriate or on your phone, like you said earlier with the grandparents, we do know that parents who are on their own media, meaning that they're watching something that is appropriate for them in terms of content, or on their device, say a lot fewer words during those interactions. There have been studies recording parents when the TV is on and when the TV is off. And we find that when a device is on, the number of words your child is exposed to is huge. It's definitely a deficit of words spoken to a child while a device is on. So your child learns from hearing words and you talking to your child. So definitely if you're watching something together, you want to talk about it as well. And
Yeah.
that really,
So
really
I've had
helps.
parents ask me, so can I have my infant in the room with me while I'm watching, basketball or some TV shows? And I let them know that it's probably not ideal because that background noise isn't helping with their speech at all. And so, if they're sleeping, let them sleep in their, in a separate room or something.
No,
Let's
absolutely.
see. And I love the scaffolding idea. Even in my practice, I talk to kids about Daniel Tiger goes to see Dr. Anna, or Doc McStuffins takes care of her, her stuffed animals. So sometimes having that connection with the real life can be very powerful for children. So let's move on to the next question is about social media. And, there are age limits sometimes of when kids can and should be on social media. I know when my daughter was 11 or 12, she tricked me. She's like, oh, let me see your face for a second. And it got me to do a face ID to permit her to download Snapchat to her phone. And I found it later on. I'm like, you are sneaky. And I took it off her phone. But that age is, I think, 13 and up. Whatever it was an age that she had not reached yet. So why are these age, minimums in place? And is it so important that we follow them?
Yeah, and the age minimum, like you said, was 13. And like I said earlier, there's differential susceptibility to media, and some kids are more susceptible to the negative effects and some are more susceptible to the positive effects. So that is a recommendation, and that's, your decision to decide whether that's an appropriate age or you want to wait for when they're older or younger, and what media that you're sort of saying that I want to set up this account because they're talking to the grandparents or their cousins, or and limit it in that way. The internet and social media, somebody coins the world the Wild West, and it feels sometimes like it's the Wild West. Certainly social media was not designed with kids in place, and I think, again, talking with your child about when you decide to go on social media, about digital safety rules, again, about avoiding certain type of media, about talking about rabbit holes, about inappropriate content. And I think what's great about this family media plan is that it really helps families um, bring up the discussion about social media and about what their kids are seeing online and experiencing online. And I think in addition to social media and media, I think it's also important to have regular conversations about mental health. We know that we are having a pandemic of mental health crises in this country, and you really want to talk to your child not only about what they're seeing on social media, but how they're feeling about what they're seeing. And like are they witnessing bullying? Are they witnessing drama? Are they witnessing a whole slew of things? And then sort of talking to kids like, if you're experiencing this, what can you do? Like, can you block somebody? Can you take a break from the platform? Can you talk to a friend? Can you talk to an adult? So just giving the teens sort of the okay to say, you know what, if this doesn't feel right for you, then it's okay to say, I'm taking a break from social media. And I think just empowering kids to have that discussion and to sort of say that this isn't a good fit for me.
Yeah, and you even see celebrities taking breaks from social media sometimes, and those can be learning examples that we can talk to our children about. We have a question about children with autism. Are there certain considerations regarding media and kids with conditions such as autism?
Yes, and I think a lot of parents, I get a lot of questions as well about um, autism, about children with ADHD, and we know that children with these do struggle in general with communication, language, adapting to change, controlling impulses, and I think it's even more difficult and challenging with children who have autism and ADHD. I think those are definitely amplified. Um, Definitely media can help with these challenges, but it also can create more challenges in these areas. So I think it's important to really think about this. And again, this similar sort of like recommendations, making media something shared that you do together. creating unplugged zones, areas where you're not having screens, and then limiting entertainment some of the times and trying to get kids, especially now that the weather's getting warmer here in the Northeast, is I tell parents to go outside and play. It's really, really helpful. Specific tips for children with autism spectrum disorder, you sometimes see kids stuck on a particular show or app, and you really want to try sometimes to switch it up or take turns playing different games or different apps to sort of help them navigate it. One thing I really do like, especially with kids with ADHD, is to use visual timers. I find that when you say 10 more minutes, 10 more minutes when you're on device, it's like you turn around and like the 10 minutes is gone. So there's a lot of really useful visual timers that I really like because it sort of counts down in color how much time you have left. And it's something, and we know that definitely kids with autism definitely respond better to visual prompts, and it lets them see how much time they have rather than a verbal reminder, which doesn't sometimes, I think all kids connect into how much time you really have left.
Well, that's an excellent tip. One question is about other languages. Do you know if any of these resources are available in Spanish?
So yes, the phone quiz and the media plan is available in Spanish. So when you log in, it gives you an opportunity to go into English, to go into the Spanish version of it. And those are the two languages, English and Spanish, that it's available in.
Okay, great. Let's see. There's a question about parents who have language barriers and may have trouble finding a balance. I guess that might be answered by some of these Spanish language ones.
Mhm.
These days, there are all kinds of translation apps that can also help. Any thoughts on?
Yeah, and
No, go ahead.
healthychildren.org. I know our wonderful AAP staff has been putting in links in the chat to various articles, but we do have healthychildren.org has wonderful resources in Spanish as well. So that definitely is a place to go to. And like I said, both these tools are available in Spanish as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and turn the microphone back over to the AAP to help wrap things up for us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shu and Dr. Tomopoulos. That was really great information. And thank you, everyone, to all of our attendees for joining us today. We invite you to follow us on healthychildren.org on Instagram, Facebook, we're on Pinterest and Twitter. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Keep an eye out for a quick survey that will let us know. That's where you can let us know what you found most helpful and any suggestions that you may have. The webinar was supported by AT&T, and on behalf of AAP and healthychildren.org, thank you again for joining us.